think there's a great need for more leadership and management education in the field of humanitarian work. You know, a lot of times we focus so much on making sure that our people have technical skills that we can overlook the management and leadership skills that make all of the other things work. It's really important that people take a time to be trained in leadership and to even observe good and bad leaders in their own personal experience when they're working in the field. My name is Dr. Stephanie Kayden. I'm the Vice Chair and Chief of International Emergency Medicine and Humanitarian Programs at the Department of Emergency Medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. And I'm also the Director of the Lavine Family Humanitarian Studies Initiative at the Humanitarian Academy at Harvard and the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. I started working in the humanitarian field in 2004 and had my first deployment to the earthquake in Pakistan in 2005 in the Northwest Frontier Province and Kashmir. I first got into the humanitarian field when I was a fellow of international emergency medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital. I came to the fellowship with the intention of learning a bit about humanitarian aid and a little bit about improving emergency care worldwide, and with the mentorship of Michael Van Rooyen and Jennifer Leaning, I got quickly into the field and have been in humanitarian aid ever since. Leadership is a skill that can absolutely be learned, whether it's in person from a mentor or even from an online video. It's important to keep in mind at the end of the day that to lead is to serve. You as a leader have to be ready to be there to set the vision, to state the clear goals, and give clear instructions to your team while making sure that you're absorbing all of the opinions and reactions from your team. The leader has many of the same tasks to do as other team members, but also the additional tasks of organizing, of thinking ahead, of looking after the team morale. And those are things that are well within the grasp of most humanitarian workers. I think my most memorable experience in the field was shortly after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. A colleague of mine and I were helping at a field hospital. We saw over the course of several days the situation there deteriorate in a way that I hadn't seen before. And to make a long story short, there ended up being a small child, one of 200 of our patients who were all similarly terribly injured. He had had a terrible break in his leg, and over the course of the days we were there, he had gotten blood poisoning with a widespread infection. And because of a lack of access to surgery, which that team was not able to provide at the time, at about 3 in the morning, he began to die. And it was only at that time when the head surgeon, who was leading this whole team, trying to care for these 200 people, ran over to the boy's bedside and right in front of his mother and all the other patients, screamed out, "Somebody give me a knife," because he was going to amputate the boy's leg there without anesthesia right in front of everyone in a misguided attempt to do something. The outcome of that case ended up not going well, but it did shine a light on the extreme difficulties that people face in trying to be humanitarian responders when they are not trained to do so. I think the first thing that a leader who's in a critical situation has to remember is to take care of him or herself so that they can be the best leader possible. It's important to get enough sleep, get enough to eat, and make sure that you're looking after yourself in the same way that you want to look after your staff. It's really difficult when you're in the field in a stressful situation to keep the team motivated day after day. What I'd recommend for that is to make sure that the team takes some time every day to decompress and to review really why you're there. Make sure you remind everybody of the ultimate goal, which is usually to help the local people, and also to help the team gain some perspective. This is an overwhelming business. When you see people who are struggling and starving and dying every day, it can be really hard not to get lost emotionally in that. And of course, your team will feel responsible for a lot of it. So it's important as a leader to bring some perspective. Now, after that, if you've put yourself in the best possible position to make good leadership decisions, you then have to make sure that you are opening the floor to opinions from the staff to the extent that you can. There are very few crisis situations that really require an autocratic leader to just bark instructions. Sometimes those exist, but usually you do have time to collect the opinions of the team and to make sure you understand why people are saying what they're saying before you make your decision. One of the things that I wish someone had told me before my first leadership experience in the field is to communicate and communicate and communicate all the time. When there is a problem with a leader and his or her staff in the field, it's often based on assumptions. So I would encourage people to not make assumptions. Rather, make sure you're constantly communicating with your staff what you expect, what your plans are, and why you're doing the things that you're doing, so that you can make sure that everybody's on the same page and working together. I think another key skill for humanitarian leaders to have is the ability to delegate tasks properly. It's not enough just to tell someone to do something. It's important for them to know exactly what the end point is. What exactly is your goal with some specificity? For example, what exactly do you need to accomplish? When do you need to accomplish it by? And what priority is this task or this ask? Because most of your workers are going to have a lot of things to do, and they need to know where this fits on the priority list. So it's important to give very clear instructions about what you want the end outcome to be, but be a little more flexible in how people arrive at the goal. I think if you are looking over their shoulder and micromanaging how they're doing the work they're doing, that can be disheartening for workers. But if you give them the autonomy, you may find that there's a lot of creativity on your team, and if you've been very specific about the goal, you'll still get what your team needs. There's a big difference between a leader and a manager. As Peter Drucker said, management is doing things right, and leadership is doing the right thing. So a manager is in charge of day-to-day operations, making sure that the T's are crossed and the I's dotted and things are going as well as they can. The leader is the one who sets the vision for the team, who makes sure that everybody knows what the goal is, who seeks opinions from the team when making decisions on behalf of the team. And the two roles are different but complementary. In instructing young leaders, what I often find is that many young people who are new to leadership actually lack some key managerial skills, like how to run a meeting and how to communicate effectively. And I've always found that it's really difficult to be a good leader if you don't have solid management skills. I think the key managerial skills for people to seek out are skills involving how to manage programs, how to delegate work to different members of the team, how to lead meetings in an effective way, and one of my favorites is how to write email in an effective way that gets responses. I think women in all leadership positions, not just in humanitarian work, find themselves with unique challenges when it comes to being a leader. That's something that will eventually change, but until we get there, there are some really practical things that a woman can do to make sure that she's heard and respected as a leader. The first is, as all leaders need to do, make sure that you're always taking the high road and that you serve as a leader with absolute integrity. It's more important for you than it will be for a man. The other thing is to make sure that you make yourself heard in a calm but confident way. Always speak up in meetings when you have something to say. Make sure that your views and those of your team are heard. It's also as simple as when you introduce yourself, always say your first and your last name and make sure that people know who you are. When you arrive for a meeting with a group of people from your team that include men, or maybe people taller than you, or maybe people older than you, you'll find that people automatically look to the tallest, oldest man to seek out the leader. So make sure you beat them to the punch. Step forward, introduce yourself as the leader of your team, and point out to people what all the roles are of the other people that are there with you. And just make sure that very calmly and politely that you are recognized as the leader. It will help you be more effective when it comes time to state your decisions. I think a lot of people find when they get into the field that what they learned in the classroom just is not rolling out the way they thought it would. It's important to remember that by definition, humanitarian response work is always going to be a little chaotic, and it's okay if you see a little chaos, a little dysfunction, and things not being exactly like they told you it was going to be in the classroom. That is part and parcel of being a humanitarian worker. One of the classic things that makes for a poor leader is, I think, the inability to take negative feedback while you're in the field. I once was in the position of evaluating a field program, and the leader of the aid agency team that we were evaluating was a person who had quite a lot of problems taking criticism. Even though our official job there was to evaluate the program, the leader, and the staff, and give that feedback, when the time came to give the feedback, we found that this leader had a big chip on her shoulder, and every tiny thing that we offered as a suggestion was met with an extremely emotional, very loud, very defensive response. Now, it can be hard to hear bad things about yourself, but when you're a leader and someone approaches you, whether it's someone on your team or not, with a bit of negative feedback, it's really important to open your ears at that time. Especially if the person's a team member of yours, you should realize that it's usually very difficult for a team member to come to the leader with some criticism or some negative feedback. And if they have plucked up the courage to do that, it's probably something you need to hear. It doesn't mean that they're right, but there's usually at least a grain of truth in what they say. And they are doing you a great service in giving you a gift by giving you this negative feedback. So try to take it in that vein, because your most important leadership lessons will be learned that way. It's really difficult to navigate a situation in which you strongly disagree with the decisions that a leader is making at a critical time. And I think in reality, sometimes your choices at a time like that will be a bit limited. It's always important, though, for everyone who is part of the followership of a leader to know that it is their responsibility to speak up in an appropriate way and make sure that the leader is hearing the various opinions on the team, especially if there's some disagreement. At the end of the day, usually the leader gets to call the shots. But as a follower, it's important that you do your job and make sure that your opinions are heard. I think for people just starting in the humanitarian field, it's important to realize that leadership starts on day one. Even if you are not yet in charge of people, you will probably find an opportunity to exert some leadership potential while you're working with a team. Unfortunately, in all parts of life, we find that there are a lot of people who are not quite ready for a leadership position, and you may be on a team where the leader is somebody who's not quite ready for the job. At those times, while it's not your goal to replace that leader and take over their job, there are many things that you can do as an observant follower to practice your emerging leadership skills. You can get a lot of leadership training just by being part of a team and helping to guide the team toward the success that they need in the field. One way is to make sure that the team is clear on its goals and mission. So if the leader that you have been assigned has not made clear what it is the team is supposed to do, you as a follower can practice your leadership skills by inquiring to the leader or summarizing and clarifying for the group of what the goals and the mission are. And you can do that in a way that is not threatening to your current leader, but still gets these things clarified for the team. Another way that you can use your emerging leadership skills when you're not yet the leader of your team is in keeping team morale high. Team morale is every team member's responsibility, but it is the duty of the team leader to try to make sure that the team is emotionally in a good place. If you find that your team leader hasn't really taken care of team morale, it's a good opportunity for you to try to lift the team's spirits by engaging them in some healthy and constructive relaxation or fun, not at anyone's expense. So It's a great way actually to identify yourself as a good leader in preparation for your next job. One of the most important things you can do as a leader is to express all the time your gratitude for having the team that you have. I have had wonderful experience as a leader and a lot of good successes as a leader. And I can tell you that when we've had successes, they have absolutely been attributable to my team, without question. And when we have had failures, they are my fault. It is the team leader's responsibility to get things done properly. But I can tell you that you will never, as a leader, be solely responsible for your team's success. So make sure that people hear that, both that your team hears it, and more importantly, that your team hears it when you're speaking to people outside the team. Because you know what? It's going to be true. I think if people who are watching this video leave with one message, I'd just like to say that it's okay to relax and don't stress out about standing up to the responsibilities that you will have as a leader, because we are all human and so are you. We'll make mistakes, and it's all part of the learning journey of a leader. So while you should always give it your best, don't be too upset when you mess up, because you will mess up, and you'll mess up hopefully as fabulously as I have messed up in the past. And if you're not falling flat on your face at a pretty regular interval, you're probably not learning. So I hope that everyone's learning continues.